Hello, I'm Luke Smith from Newcastle University, and I'll keep this as brief as possible. All of my slides have appeared in a much more jazzy font than I authored them in, so enjoy that. If you if you flick onto the next slide, so I mean my background is a civil engineer. That then sacked all of that off and went and worked as a software engineer, and then did a PhD in supercomputer-based flood simulation. So I'm going to talk about none of those things really, because instead I ended up doing a lot of work on standards recently, and sitting within the same project as Liz and Steve. This infrastructure research ontologies one, I'm leading the component which is ontologies of ontologies. So I wanted to start by just emphasizing that there's an absolute truckload of standards out there, some of which can be used together and not all of them. So I view this very much as not trying to create new standards unnecessarily. It's about trying to join some of these things up where possible to make them work. And some of these standards that have started in the sort of smart city space and the discovery in the metadata space, like Hypercat, which was used in the Cityverse project in Manchester, has already died a death. So some of these things are quite short-lived, and that's what we're trying to avoid. If you flick onto the next slide, so one of the reasons why I was so interested in this standards piece is because I've been working with the urban observatories, which is another part of the three UCRIC strands, to standardize APIs and linked data approaches for real-time networks of sensors. But the problem with real-time sensor data is you need context. And when you consider where DAFNI sits, if you take the real-time data, some of the previous things that have gone on, like NISModDB, and the ability to bring multiple models together into one space, it's quite easy to see how we start to move towards something that is the beginnings of a national digital twin, or at least a framework in which these could exist. So these sort of concepts that you see here around the urban observatories, I'm hoping we can start to reuse some of those same things in the modeling space and start to join up those gaps. And if you flick onto the next slide, just to emphasize that, this is a diagram that I drew more than a year ago, where, you know, the bit on the right there is effectively urban observatories and all the complexity that goes with the sensors and the real-time data. But the bit that we needed to join them together was that shared geography, the linked data, and the modeling and the applications. So I've helpfully just drawn a box around that and labeled it DAFNI, because thinking about it, actually, you know, that is exactly where DAFNI can sit in this process. And then the next slide was kind of me trying to demonstrate what we wanted to avoid, which is I don't want people to have to troll through reams and reams of standards. You know, again, the beauty of bringing all of this into one space and one framework and the DAFNI environment is that interoperability is baked in. You know, if you want to use data, it exists in the DAFNI data store. If you want to use a model, it exists in DAFNI. And somebody has already done that work to join those two together, so you spend less of your time reshaping things. And then on my final slide, I promise, just some immediate sort of engagement and advocacy opportunities that sprung to mind. The first is the geospatial CDT. So that is Newcastle and Nottingham. It's a year in now, so the MRes students are about to finish and start their PhD proper. And as soon as we can actually get into the building, I'm hoping, you know, to sit down and have a word with them about how DAFNI can help with their specific projects. A number of people have highlighted transport as an area of interest, obviously for infrastructure, and I'm involved in some of the Department for Transport and the Transport for the North work on standards in that space. So specifically NetX, which is transport pricing, SiriusX, which is disruptions, and the DFT's National Transport Data Access Point, which is a sort of metadata database. I would like to have a conversation with TFN and the DFT about how we can work those things into DAFNI, and that would sit alongside some of the other things DAFNI's already doing, such as the GTFS public transport schedules. And then the reason why those of you who've been trying to contact me recently have probably struggled is because another piece I'm doing would be very well suited to DAFNI, which is a public transport risk model for SAGE. And this has never been done before anywhere in the world. It's only been done for aeroplanes in the past. But basically, we want to build a very detailed micro model of how COVID-19 or subsequent viruses may spread. And in order to do that, a huge part of it is actually analysing the contacts people have with surfaces and the proximity of people, the coughing, the face touching, all of those things. I suspect I've probably got access to more CCTV data than MI5 at this point. So all of the security, the GPUs, the high performance computing that comes into that, you know, DAFNI would be an ideal place for this model to live at the end. And that's it. Thank you.